Oh, I do hear the
Good morning. Welcome back to Coffee and Colorful Conversation. I have a
rain.
special guest here today, my life coach, my lifeline, my life raft. I can't say how many adjectives she brings to my life and has brought to my children's lives, my husband's life. I talk about her often on here. She is a life coach, among other things. Her name is Alejandra Christofoli, and I was blessed to have her enter my life at the absolute perfect time when everything felt like it was just stale and Groundhog Day and doing things over and over again and expecting different results and being perfectly insane, just repeating the same things that made me miserable. Um, I went to traditional therapy because that's what everyone seems to do. Someone recommended a therapist. And what I realized quickly is that the therapist will let you talk and talk and talk and talk, which Alejandra knows I love to do. And so do you. You come here every week, and hear me talk and talk. And she would just, yeah, and take notes and write things down and say, we're out of time. I'll see you next week. So it was paying someone to listen to me and not judge what I was saying, but not help me figure out why I just keep coming back and saying the same thing. So
Yeah.
for me, the difference between a therapist and a life coach was someone to call you out on your shit a little bit and push you to the next level. So you've heard me, sorry, voice is not awake. You've heard me share how much growth I've had as a result of the life coaching. So Alejandra is here to meet all of you and to share with you something special that she's offering that we all need right now, especially after the year that we've had. So welcome, Alejandra. So great to have you here today.
Thank you. I am so excited. This is so much fun. I love when we get to do these kinds of things, right?
Yes, it's a
And
little early for you. Alejandra's in California, so this is 7 a.m. for her. She's a trooper
so
coming
I've got my coffee chat here.
the fuel.
The fuel. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I have been a coach for over 18 years now, which is kind of crazy that it's been almost 2 decades. And I really was kind of a pioneer in the industry. Nobody knew what coaching was back then, especially life coaching. So to come in as a life coach and get to pave the path for coaches has been really awesome. But throughout my career, it really started within the health and beauty industry. So I have a love for this industry. I was 16 years old when I got into it. And it's just been a foundation for my life and also becoming a coach. My husband and I, just so you have a little bit more information about me, my husband and I also own a multi-million dollar coffee company here in San Diego. So I've got some fabulous coffee with me. It's called Lofty Coffee, and we're actually in the midst of building our 6th location right now, which through the pandemic has been insane, as you all probably know, being business owners yourself or entrepreneurs yourselves. It's been interesting learning how to pivot and still stay grounded and find a place of like true happiness, which is a lot of the foundation of which I coach on. But I'm basically working with entrepreneurs who are at their wits' end, and I'm challenging them to reject those traditional self-help models that don't really work, and coaching them into mastering life through developing a really active relationship with God first and foremost, and also ultimately with themselves. Yeah, and I do that through a process that Elaine has been through, and I coin it or call it the 180 method. And it has transformed. I've now, with almost 2 decades, I've worked with thousands of clients, and I typically do it one-on-one, but I'm starting to venture into doing groups since workshops and retreats kind of aren't totally happening right now. Having to shift and pivot in my own business as well, and starting to do more groups. So
I love that you're doing the group because I know initially I kept saying you need to keep doing this. Don't stop doing this because it did so much for my life, for my daughter's life, for my son's life, for my marriage, for my business, for everything. And, it can be cost prohibitive to do the one-on-one. When I first met you and you were like, oh, I'm going to do a call. We're going to follow up. I want to reach out. And you did the call. And of course, I'm bawling within 5 minutes. And I'm like, why is this lady making me cry all the time? I am not a crier, but you showed up in my life at exactly, they say reason, season, lifetime.
Totally.
You were the reason and the season and the lifetime. You were all three. Who knew we would still be connected after all these years? So
Right.
It's not something like get in, fix everything, get out. There's times where I would call you and say, this is a big decision. I need you to talk me off the ledge. And you very gently remind me, remember when you said blah, blah, blah? No, you shouldn't do that. So it has been so amazing having you in my corner. And I was so excited. Alejandra sent me the page about this group that she's doing. And the first thing that I saw was a really good friend of mine as a testimonial on there. And I tried to help her as a fellow salon owner, as, a hair color and salon business coach, but not as a life coach. And she just wasn't hearing it from me. She's super nice, super sweet, was letting everybody walk all over her. The one thing that I did get her to do prior to seeing Alejandra was to get rid of her bad apple. She had a high producing, really stress inducing employee. And I was like, girl, I've done this a million times and it's hard to let go of that golden goose that brings in all the money, but they are wreaking havoc on your business and your life. And she needs to go. And she finally, I got the text. I did it. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, don't you feel so good? It's like 35 pounds of boulders on your shoulders are lifted as soon as you do the hard thing. So we know, without Alejandra, we know that the fear is never going away, and having her in your life isn't taking the fear away. It's giving you the tools and the strength that in spite of the fear, you make the hard decision and move forward. I can give you a million examples of when I would hang up with Alejandra and we'd realize what I needed to do. And it was so big that I took it upon myself to make it a little softer and squeeze a little bit of air out of the tires. And then literally, 6 months or more later, I was back to feeling how I felt. And she's kind of like, well, you just let the air out of the tires. You didn't take the tire off and get rid of the tire. So, it's up to you to do the work, but she has a way of showing you in the mirror, what it is that you need to do. And before we started today, I said, everybody needs a coach. There's famous athletes that still need coaches. There's singers, actresses, I could go on and on. Every field, big business hire coaches and do constant trainings. Amazon, Apple, all those companies, they're not just sitting where they are. They're constantly trying to better themselves and improve. And the hair industry is no different. There's been so many changes within, things were changing already, but COVID fast tracked the changes and it's like mayhem. So,
yeah. Well, and I think there's some blessings in that, right? Like there's changes that had to be made, and this kind of forced everyone to be able to do that. But it also instilled more fear, doubt, confusion. I've had more and more conversations about people being lost, like depression is at all-time high. So there's a lot that's it's stirred up, obviously. And not to make our conversation totally about this, because I also feel like people are like, let's move on, which is true. But we have to move on with the lessons and the pieces that we've learned. And how do you actually do that so we're not repeating the same things again and relying upon our circumstances or, like success, wealth, health, relationships to fulfill needs that we have in order to be happy or to be okay with things or to feel good all the time. I think that's the other thing that we learned about this, is that I look at like feeling good and happiness as a focus, not a feeling. And we chase that feeling. And when we're doing that, it perpetuates a cycle it's like I call it the pain cycle, right? It's this constant and this is why we're also so disconnected and, again, lost, doubting, confusion, fearful, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. And I think the biggest thing that I took away and am conscious of on a daily basis is understanding that when you have a little tiny conflict or a little toot from somebody, that it's not about you. It's what happened 2 hours prior to that. That has shifted so many things in me where I can just be like, okay, so let's talk about something else. Like you can tell when you trigger someone and you can shift the conversation. So I think recently, salon wise, how this relates is the election. Every client wanted to sit in the chair and want to know who you're voting for, what your feeling is on XYZ, and the tension between wearing a mask, both people wearing a mask and trying to have a conversation, the stylist trying to cut the hair around the mask and color the hair around the mask and squirting everything down and cleaning everything. And it was just this whole shitstorm of stress and no outlet for it. You couldn't then go to the gym and like work off the stress or go have a glass of wine with a girlfriend. It's like you had to leave that situation, a bundle of stress, and go home and be isolated. So to your point, the depression is like, it's like the perfect storm for anyone who has issues to begin with.
Yeah, completely. Even for people who don't have a lot of issues, and it's just like intense.
You do now.
I mean, we all got our stuff, right? Like you put it under very stressful situations, it's all going to come out. I think one of the things, and you often talk about this, is learning what I call the golden key, which is how you actually create your circumstances. And I know that's like one of the biggest things that you loved and took away from the coaching journey is knowing how to be able to do that. And that's such a key part of like, it's not like we go to school and learn these life concepts. I believe there is a book where all the life concepts are but we don't like really take those and apply them and learn how to truly use them given the circumstances that we're in. And I think that's like the biggest piece too now is being able to, let me back up for a second. It's one of the biggest reasons why I also decided to start doing groups. I actually had a client at the end because the one-on-one coaching is 6 months. And so he was finishing his 6-month journey and he says to me, why are you only doing this for like one-on-one? There's so many more people that need what you have. And he's a very high level, he was an engineer and like super smart gentleman, has done a lot of self-improvement, self-help kind of stuff, big name kind of things. And he was like, I have never experienced anything like what we just went through. And like, I felt almost like shame on me for not sharing it with more people is kind of how it felt, especially now. And he was like, you have to get this in more people's hands. And that was really a driving factor of like, oh my goodness, I've been selfish in a way, thinking like, no, this is my thing. This is my jam. I focus on one-on-one. So it's another reason why I decided I've got to do groups and teaching them these fundamental, again, I believe it comes back to relationship to God and yourself. And that's like key, so key. And then learning how you create your life and your circumstances.
Well, I get why you wanted to hold on to the one-on-one because we're unpacking a lot of our emotional whatever, up until this point, and it can be very personal. Yeah. But I also think hearing that other people are feeling the way that you do is, that's comforting as well. Yeah. Sometimes when you're on the one-on-one journey, you're like, oh my gosh, what do other people tell her? Like, is this only me? There's that little bit of thing. And I think you're going to find that if there's something that people don't want to share, that they're going to share that in the one-on-one with you. But the actual foundation and the teaching part of what you share that I got a little dose of initially in the public speaking training and then all in on the one-on-one, that doesn't change. Mm-hmm. So whether you say it to 400 people or one person, the message is the same. And once you get that foundational stuff, then tying it into me individually versus that person is something that they can do one-on-one with you moving forward, because they're not going to want only 6 months of you. I can attest to that. I think we're going on 8 years or something like that together.
That's not long. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, exactly. And it just like unfolds. And something you mentioned earlier, because I know this can be scary too, of thinking about it like, oh my goodness, what are we going to uncover, or how hard, like the deep, big stuff that you were talking about, and you would just take like a little bit of the air out. The beauty of having a coach with you is that you're not doing it alone. Like that's the part that I love also, is that I get to be there with someone, and I happen to have been down that path many times before. So I know where all the like pitfalls are and the dark corners are, if you will. And, just really working hand in hand with it. And also, if you think about it, like any major athlete has worked with coaches, as you were talking about. That's how they get better. That's how they do their craft at a high level, and constantly need to have someone help them and support them to see those areas that they aren't able to see, or those small tweaks that make such a difference. Like, why wouldn't we have that in our life and in our business?
Absolutely. And, what happens in the salon industry is our significant other becomes the dumping ground. So I would have a stressful 10-hour day. I was starving, exhausted, haven't peed in hours, sweaty, gross, makeup smudged all over my face. It's like 9:30 at night. I left the house at 9 in the morning, and I'm coming home at 10 at night. And I walk into checking homework, making lunches, like the second job, right? So, and you find him in my situation, I would find my husband sitting watching television, so relaxed because he's winding down, ready for bed. He's been home, dinner's done, all that. And I'm like, blah, 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 just come in, I've just been doing hair. I'm still like, this is like my 5 o'clock to anybody else. My 10 o'clock is their 5 o'clock. So I would come home so hype and filled with everything that happened during the day that I couldn't unpack elsewhere, and completely vomit the entire thing on him. This happened to this, and this one, this, and this, da, 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 da. And I'm like, good night. And I would go to bed and sleep like a baby. And he's like this, staring at the ceiling, like, what was that? What the heck? What am I supposed to do with this? And then he would ruminate all of the things that I was saying, and he's taking them out of context because he wasn't there. So he doesn't know the full story. So he's elevating the stress 10 times higher, and he's holding on to it, and I'm done. I've dumped it. Yeah. So that's when I started to go to a traditional therapist, because I'm like, I need an outside person to unload this on, because of course I can't unload it on my staff. I have to be the strong leader and lead by example. I got this. Nothing bothers me. Sloman Shield, Wonder Woman, fending off all the bullets. But then there was nobody for me. So the therapist helped, but literally 5 years of traditional dumping on a therapist and unloading, and the tissue box and the whole thing that you can imagine from the movies of what it's like on the couch. No movement, no change, still here, still complaining, still doing the same things over and over again. And when I look at my journal with you, the instant action and the instant changes was so immediate and so important, and so what's the word? It worked so well. I got so much positive movement from the choices and the changes and all of that. So when I tell people, people haven't heard of life coaches. They're like, what's that? I've never heard of that. But if they only knew what a gift it is to have somebody in your corner, but also it's like having that best friend that makes you better than you are, because they tell you how great you are, but they also tell you when you're being a shithead. They give you the honest, tough love. That's what more of a life coach is. And I don't want to keep saying it like Alejandra's going to scold you, but she's going to, when you say something, she's going to say, did you hear what you just said? Yeah. It's more like that. And then you're like, what did I say? And then I would go back and listen or look in my journal and be like, oh, that's what she's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so true. It's not a scolding at all. It's very gentle, but yet I want to say confrontational in the same way, but not confrontational in like argument or, laying it on you kind of way. That's not in my nature. And I'm sure coaches out there that do that, and maybe that works for people. It's just not me and my style. But it's really about that confrontational is more about like, let me hold the mirror up for you so that you can see, instead of like I'm walking blindly into things and I'm just in a constant like blaming, complaining, fearful, doubtful kind of state and don't know how to get out of this other than just to keep doing what I've been doing. And that's really more of what it is. It's like, gently, let me hold the mirror up for you so that you can see. And knowing like those specific areas, like there's a specific place where I was like, okay, what did you hear yourself say? Or you need to, it may be something I'm saying, and what do you hear in that? Or how is it landing for you? So that, we're able to talk through it and you can get to the core of what's actually causing or creating the things that are happening in your life.
Can I share the villain, victim, hero in a salon situation without giving anything away? So, along with the other things that I shared that were my favorite, as far as like creating your own circumstances, all of that stuff. The other thing that is magical, and I share this at dinner parties, people look at me like I'm crazy. But in any situation, we have in the salons, we always have, I shouldn't say always, it's very common in a salon to have some drama. Yeah. We're creative people. We interact with a lot of people. There's a lot of exchange of energy, whether you like it or not. Clients are bringing in their energy and you're exhausted by it. And different behaviors come out that may not be the best behavior. So in one of the trainings, Alejandra was talking about the roles that people end up playing, and everyone has a go-to that they kind of fall back on. Yep. And she was sharing the roles are villain, victim, and hero. So everyone in the class is thinking like, oh, I want to be the hero, right? We talked about Wonder Woman and the bullets. It's like, oh, I want to be the hero. And then everybody's, she says, tell me what you think you are. And we go around and we share. And I'm like, I'm the hero. And this one's like, I'm the victim. I'm the villain. I'm this. And then she says to us, none of them are good. You don't want to be any of them. And you're like, what? You said, 3 roles, everybody has one, and you do, but it doesn't mean that it's a good thing. So what happened after that lesson, when you go back into your life, when I go somewhere with my mom and sister, the dynamic of the 3, it's always a 3. We'll be driving. We were taking my niece to go see a beauty school. And my mom is me grown up, very controlling, likes to be the one driving, likes to be the one making all the decisions. Well, that's me when my mom's not there. So when someone's in your role, you can't be in your role. And then it causes you to be a role you don't want to be. Anybody following me? Am I talking too fast? So when my mom is in that hero, I got this, I'm the strong one. My sister is in the back seat going, can you believe this happened? Can you believe that happened? I can't believe this happened. Like she's like total Eeyore in the back seat. Like this happened to me. This happened. I can't believe it. So she's sitting in victim. So I'm like, oh, great. I get to be the villain and say, Mom, don't go that way. You need to go this way. You're going the wrong way. We need to get da-da-da-da. So then I become the bully, which is the villain. So when I saw that, after learning that, in every situation where there's conflict, when everything's okay, nobody's in their role, everybody's getting along, it's when there's conflict. So when you know that and you see a client behaving a certain way, you can change their behavior and kind of stop them in that cycle because you see it coming at you and you're like, oh, she's being a victim. So I have to be careful not to be the villain or the hero because I'm going to trigger her. So it's so interesting because you can see, like I think I told you I was on the beach and this mom, there was, 2 little kids. The one was the smaller, younger one. And the older one found a friend that was her age. I was the baby of 3. So it happened constantly. Yeah. My brother and sister would find a friend and it'd be the 3 of them. And I was like, you're too little, you're too young. You can't play with all that crap. So I'm watching it happen on the beach. And the little one picked up a shell and the older sister was like, that's mine. And the mom was like, give it to your sister, like ripped it out of the kid's hands and said, give it to your sister. Or no, I'm sorry. It was, oh, let the baby keep it. He doesn't know. So the mom didn't honor that it was the older daughters. And I'm watching it happen. And I'm like, wow, this is some powerful shit, because I
Yeah.
totally get that this poor kid, when they're 20 years old, is going to behave differently because of the way that mom handled that situation. So you shared with us about the 5-year-old, and that was hugely impactful, knowing that at 5 years old, your perspective and what happened around you and how the behaviors were is what forms you in your emotions and how you handle things. So now when my husband and I have an argument, I'm like, oh, come here, 5-year-old Jeffy, you need a little kiss. He's like, I do. So it kind of calms everything down, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. And I love hearing you explain this, like this testament, everyone, and thank you, because I'm seeing all the comments come through and everyone's like, this is awesome. So just, yeah, loving being here with you all. But it's a testament of like, this was 8 years ago and this work is still working for you. And it's not something like, okay, I have a little bit of a change for a little bit of a time. It's like long lasting changes. And so hearing you repeat it back and knowing that it's so integrated into yourself is like, that's so cool. That was cool for me to watch. So
it's so true, because you can't not know it now. It's like Rowena, we were in a clubhouse the other day and Rowena shared that, and I forgot to tell my husband this, when you look at the FedEx logo, that there's an arrow, and I never saw it. Excuse me. I never noticed it. Nobody ever pointed it out. But because she pointed it out, she's like, every time you see a FedEx truck or a FedEx envelope, your eye is going to go right to that arrow because now you see it.
Yeah.
So the same thing goes for these fundamentals of what you teach in your coaching. Is I would say the biggest testimony I can give to you is that when something happens and I'm triggered, somebody upsets me, somebody hurts my feelings, my reaction is so different than it ever was before, because I can share how I feel instead of what happens is, somebody hurts our feelings. We stuff it. We go home, we unload it on a spouse, we upset them. Now the spouse is upset, you're upset. Then the next day you may be being, grumpy, and now you're affecting your children. So it's like this whole trickle down effect, where if I said, Alejandra, when you said that, that really hurt my feelings. And I don't know if you may not even realize that you said it, or you may not even mean what you said, but like that really stung, and having that conversation in the moment versus that build up and build up and build up. And then all of a sudden you're like telling somebody off for the little, and they're like, oh, what's up her butt? She really overreacted to that. But it's like a build up.
Yeah.
Of stuffing. So every time I handle a situation completely different than I would have, I'll be sharing this situation with my husband, and he'll say, well, you should da-da-da-da. And I'm like, no, I didn't do all this work to do what I always did. I'm going to do this instead. And I handle it differently. And the outcome is exactly what I was looking for and better, because I turned it around and handled it the way that you taught me is more of a connection, and more having the person really understand where you're coming from and not just cutting the person off.
Yeah. That's the idea with the 180 method. It's doing a directional shift, but you have to learn how to do that, because if not, just to your point earlier when you were talking about the trauma, the triangle, drama, call it drama triangle, because that's what, ensues those roles, victim, villain, hero, to come out. But there has to be healing of those things from your past in order to be able to effectively change your behavior. It's not just like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that in the moment. Like when you're hijacked and triggered and all the stuff is happening in life, like it's very hard to be able to do that, or to do it consistently. And that's where that, like, the healing has to take place first. And looking at, there's a huge difference between healing and dealing. I don't know if you remember this, but that's like one of the biggest things we talked about in our very first conversation before you even like signed up for the coaching, is this distinction between dealing and healing. And with dealing, you're just in a constant management state, which is exhausting. Like, I don't know about you, but there's all sorts of things that we already are having to deal with in life. The last thing we need to deal with is ourselves and how we are actually handling things and managing stuff. It's, yeah, I don't want to, there's enough stuff going on than to have to carry all the baggage. But with healing, you get to that like core place and you just heal at that level. So then you don't have to deal with things in the first place. Like, that just to me and is the biggest difference between therapy and at least this type of coaching that we do.
I love that you brought up the hijack, because that was another major aha moment for me as a salon owner and a leader of a very large team. When we were coaching, I had 15 employees in a 1,200 square foot salon. It was total mayhem. And I did one-on-ones with them. And prior to going to the first stages course and learning about the hijack and about communication, it being such a big, important thing, I would say, because I know that the news that I'm delivering is happy news. So I would say, hey, Alejandra, can I chat with you for like 10 minutes at the end of today? I'll meet you upstairs in my office. And I say it like, can you grab me a cup of coffee? And the person gets that look like, oh my gosh, I'm getting fired. And I'm not realizing that that's what I just did to them. Right. So they're in a total hijack where they're like, in their mind, they're packing their station. Where am I going to work? What am I going to tell my clients? What am I going to tell my husband? Oh my gosh, I'm getting fired. And then they come in my office and I'm like, listen, I just wanted to thank you. Like, you were so good with Betty when she lost her husband, and just like the way you talked to her, like giving them praise and wanting to do it in private. But in their mind, they were like, oh my gosh, I'm getting fired. So it goes back to that story and that reactive situation. So then after learning these fundamentals of this coaching, I'd say, hey, Alejandra, I just want to give you some private praise later. You know what I mean? Like, kind of set it up as like, it's all good. Like, don't panic, and say it in a different way. One of the hardest things was when you and Bonnie had, it was Brenton and I were the examples, and we had to talk to each other about, he was a late stylist and I had to talk about it. So my leadership thing is, dude, you're late all the time. Like, what are we going to do about this? Like, this cannot continue. And it was the total worst way to possibly do it, but nobody teaches you how to lead and how to have uncomfortable conversations. So at the end of all these workshops, I would say to you, Alejandra, why are we not starting a school where kids learn this starting in 5th grade? Like, if kids could learn this stuff at the lower levels in grammar school, there wouldn't be bullies. There wouldn't be, kids committing suicide in grade school because they're getting bullied, because people would understand that their inner bully was their inner child that was never seen, heard, or loved or hugged. It's this comes so late. Like, how old was I? It was 7 years ago. So I was in my 40s, already had my children. They were already past that 5-year-old stage of that important thing. And I'm like one of those weirdos that now I'll talk to a mom that's pushing a coach and I'll say, just to let you know, like, we run around with them in that little seat and we keep throwing them out of the car, We're annoyed when we want to stop at Starbucks and they're asleep and we're like, oh crap, they don't have a drive-through. I really want my coffee. Now I got to wake them up to go get my coffee. We carry them around like they're a handbag when they're babies. Yes. Thinking that they're not a person, they're kind of like an accessory, and we know we have to take care of them. But if we only knew that first 5 years, we are forming who they are as a human being for the rest of their lives. Yeah. It's almost too much to handle. It's like, whoa, I don't know if I ever have kids, if you understood that. It's too much. But it's true. And knowing that now, I'm like, wow, I'm going to be such a great grandmom. Because I can see, you are. Even as a grandmom, I can see, a lot of grandmoms have that favorite one that they give the extra little, don't tell your sister that I gave you the 20 spot and stuff like that. Like, my friends talk about it all the time. They're like, oh, it was my grandmom's favorite. She was always handing me money and buying me things and saying, don't tell the other kids. I'm like, oh God. Yeah. I hate hearing that, because that's stuff you take for I'll never forget, my mom's girlfriend used to come at Christmas and only give my sister a gift and not all of
that. I remember that.
That
Yeah.
was part of my journal. And I was just like, how could you do, you know, my girlfriend, when I would have a baby, when I had Jack, my girlfriend has 5 kids. She knew to make a big deal out of Bryn and bring her a gift. I wouldn't have known that because I didn't have kids. So how many times have you gone to see a friend who has a baby and you're, oh, let me hold the baby. Let me hold the baby. Oh, the baby, the baby. And the other 3-year-old standing there like, hello,
Right.
I'm still here. Remember me, Annie Lane?
Yeah, totally. And what that instills for the future and how that again ends up creating part of like our life and how we react, how we communicate, how we love, how we be in, and even with like things like money and time and our health, like it doesn't just affect relationships with people, it affects relationships with everything you've got going on in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Alejandra is bringing us a happiness challenge, and I asked her to come on today to share it with all of you because I don't know about you, but I could use a big ball of happiness and lots of community and bring it into our hair world. We need it right now more than ever. So Alejandra, tell them what the happiness challenge is, where to find it, how to do it. I will be there, so I hope that you'll join me in having some happy.
And having some happy. Let's get our happy on. Yeah, so it's a 5-day happiness challenge. It's going to be hosted in my Facebook group. And Elaine, we can probably share. I'm sure we're going to share the link. There we go. Of how you can register for it totally for free. This is just like giving you the information and education so that you can begin your transformation. So I feel like there's 3 levels to it: information, education, transformation. And it's more, when you think about happiness, you think about all these things that like, okay, circumstantially or situations, like if I just make this amount of money, or if I could just get this going on in my business, or if I could just have that kind of relationship, or if this person would just do that, then I will be happy. But what that does is create circumstantial happiness, which is not long lasting at all, because as soon as that thing or person is gone, we're right back to feeling the same way we've been feeling. So this challenge is all about giving you the fundamental core pieces of actually what creates enduring happiness. That's what we're looking for. Earlier, I mentioned it, where happiness becomes a focus, not just a feeling. And when you make it about that, that's when true transformation can start to happen. And then you're not dependent upon success, money, whatever it is, to make you feel happy, but also fill a need. Because that's the other part of happiness that we attach, is that we think we have these needs. And if I could just have all this stuff meet my need, then I'm going to be happy. So I promise it's going to be different than anything you've ever experienced before. It is a challenge. So you have to show up. You have to be willing to interact, engage, and actually do the exercises that I'm going to share with you. It was funny. I was telling Elaine, I was like, gosh, it feels like it's been so long since I've done a workshop or something of this. And she's like, oh my goodness, you're like a walking workshop. I thought that was funny, which is true. So I have all sorts of like really amazing things for you to be able to apply immediately. Yeah, so that's going to start March 22nd, and it's 5 days. So it'll run through Friday the 26th, and it'll be at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, when you register there, you'll get an email on any other additional information you might need.
I love that. And I love that you said, typically it's when I get the car, I'll be happy. When I get the house, I'll be happy. I can say with 100% accuracy, the most miserable I've ever been. And when I reached out and started the coaching journey was when I made the most money. My salon was like jumping, waiting lists, 15 employees, every chair packed. Everybody was at the height of their career and everything was wonderful. And I felt like I was having like an out of body experience. I was just like looking around going, this is what I wanted. This is what I was striving for. Like, I'm here, but I don't like what here is.
And I see that all the time. That's such, yeah, exactly. It's not dependent.
I'm in another workshop with my girlfriend who's doing financials for the salon industry, and we were talking about financial goals, and she said pick something that is like a $5,000 goal, and then we're going to work towards how you're going to get to that goal. And it was interesting to hear the things that people wanted and the things that people spend a lot of their money on. And as hairdressers, one of those things is expensive handbags. The one girl was like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this one handbag. And the last two handbags that I spent a ridiculous amount of money on, as soon as I brought it home and took it out of the beautiful paper and loaded my stuff into it, I was over it.
Yeah.
And I think about how long it took. I remember being like taking my tips and putting them in a special spot. Like that's the handbag fun. Yeah. And I'm like, like if I go to sell it right now, I would get like, so much less than what I paid for it. And it's brand new. It's like a car. As soon as you drive it off the lot, nobody wants it for what you paid for it. Mm-hmm. So hairdressers can be, so being busy that they're not even realizing the habits that, it's that $5 Starbucks every single day, that at the end of the month, you're like, holy shit, I spent that much on coffee. I have a coffee pot on my counter. It's like those little things that you think are going to give you that shot of instant happy, but it's not permanent happy. Like you need to do the work to get to watching the sunrise or sunset lights you up, and it's free, know?
Right. Exactly. So true. And the work doesn't have to be hard either, especially when you have a guide to support you through that. So, yep, I want to be able to.
You are that person. And I hope you all will join Alejandra and me. I will be there in the Happiness Challenge. I hope you'll consider doing her 180 method. It has saved my marriage, my friend Trisha's marriage, and I can't even imagine how many other marriages that have been saved, because when you're different, your spouse starts being different. So know that, if you say, well, he's never going to change. Well, how about start with you? When you start to change, he's like, whoa, she's got some pop in her step. What's she taking? I want some of that. And all of a sudden, they understand where you're coming from. So you think you can't fight by yourself, right? So when you're like, not going to fight. This is 5-year-old Jeffy. Let's give a hug. It's hard to fight with somebody who's trying to hug you.
Exactly.
So thank you, Alejandra. Everyone, check out that link, happiness.theballercoach.com. Sign up for the Happiness Challenge. I will see you all there starting on the 22nd.
Thank you.
Alejandra, it's always a pleasure. So great to have you. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you. Bye.